All right, guys, so here we are. You requested it, I promised it. This is episode 1 of my new YouTube Q&A segment entitled Out on a Limb, which is where I will come to you guys on a regular basis after reading through the list of questions that you email me, Facebook me, Twitter me, Instagram me, and pick out one which I think will be the most interesting. Not that they're not all interesting, but the one that I think will get the most response and interaction from you guys, and I will do my best to answer that question as openly and as honestly as I can. And it is my intention, as these questions continue to flood in, as they often do, to keep doing this as a regular segment, and hopefully, educate a lot of people on life as a triple amputee, and really try and show people actually what it's really like, and answer those questions honestly, because a lot of the time you see the happy, the smiley, the motivational and the positive inspirational thing, but sometimes there's a different field of things behind the scenes, and things are a little bit different than what they sometimes appear. And I always try to be honest, so that's why I did this. First of all, you guys asked me for it, so I'm taking quite a leap up my comfort zone here, and I'm just going to go for it. So welcome to episode 1 of Out on a Limb. Now, excuse the pink iPad cover. Whether you believe me or not, this is my wife's iPad. But the question that I'm going to answer this week, the first question that I've had, is from a lady called Joanne Delacour. Joanne Delacour. I think, and I hope I got that right. Apologies if I didn't. But Joanne wants to know, what was my darkest moment after my injuries, and how did I overcome it? Funnily enough, with all the work I do with schools and underprivileged children, and all the talks that I deliver when I'm traveling around the world, this seems to be a question that comes up a lot, and I think it's just human nature that people want to know some of the more morbid side of a story such as mine. And like I said to you just now, I will be honest when I answer these questions. Now, I didn't have many dark moments. I think, if I'm honest, I had 2, and they were very dark. The first one was around about 3.5 weeks after my injuries. I was lying in the Selly Oak Hospital up in Birmingham. I was recovering. Believe it or not, I was relatively positive. I was trying to focus on the kind of things that I would be able to do when I got out of hospital, rather than dwelling on the things that I couldn't do. And about 3.5 weeks into that recovery, I was visited by a doctor who was an amputation specialist. At that point, actually, he was the UK's leading specialist in the field of amputations. And he came into my room and introduced himself to me, and in a nutshell, told me that I was never going to walk again. Now, I know that sounds very cliche, like it's from some soppy Hollywood film, where the guy becomes injured, gets told something, and then rises to the occasion and overcomes the adversity, but that is what happened. This doctor explained to me that in his vast experience, he had never met anybody with just one limb missing above the knee who had any success using prosthetics. And then he went on to explain to me that because prosthetics were so difficult to use, because they were so uncomfortable, and because it takes a bilateral amputee anywhere between 300 and 500% more energy to do anything than an able-bodied person, that nobody he'd ever met, like I said, who was missing just one leg above the knee, had any success. and then he left. Now, I was 24 when he told me that. I was 3.5 weeks into my recovery. I was trying to be positive and really focus on overcoming this and rebuilding my life from scratch. And then this expert told me pretty much, in not so many words, that my life was over and I would have to rely on someone for the rest of my life to care for me, and I was going to be in a wheelchair. Now, you can probably imagine that's not what I wanted to hear at that time. So I went into a very, very dark and lonely place. I didn't really want to speak to anybody at that point. I was just trying to really process what it was this guy had told me. And then in the best possible way that I could, I wanted to figure out a way around it, and a way that I could prove that guy wrong. Now, the rest of my story is a very, very long one that I don't have a chance to fully go into detail here, but that was one of the darkest moments of my life. And to try and overcome it, as hard as it was, I just went back to what I did before he had spoke to me, and I just tried to focus on the positive. And I did some research, and I asked around, and I got on the internet, started looking at what other people were achieving, and I just knew that with the right people around me, with the right equipment, the right support, and by setting myself some goals, that one day, somehow, I was gonna prove that guy wrong. Now, that was a low day for me. I'll admit that, and that lingered for probably 3 or 4 days. And then the second really low and dark moment for me was when I actually got to leave hospital for the first time. So across the road from the hospital, there was a designated flat for the families of injured military personnel. They could go there, they could stay there. It meant they didn't have to pay hotel costs and all that kind of stuff there. The Royal Marines looked after my family phenomenally and made sure that they weren't out of pocket. And the first time they let me out of hospital in a wheelchair, I went over to this flat, and it was a tower block. So we got into the communal entrance. We were a ground floor flat, so the wheelchair that I was in was pushed through the front door, which is great. And then as I was turned to go into the living room area of the flat, the wheelchair wouldn't fit because I only had the one arm. Everything was on the left-hand wheel, and it extended out quite some distance. And because of that, I couldn't fit into the front room where everyone else was hanging out and eating. So that really hit me. I kind of had to hang around in a hallway and have my dinner, and kind of felt left out and isolated from that. I couldn't fit in the toilet either. I had to pee in a milk bottle, which didn't make me feel great. And then later that evening, because I was allowed to stay away from a hospital environment and sleep in the flat, as I got ready for bed that evening, we managed to fit the wheelchair into the bedroom, and it somehow fitted through that door frame. I was pushed past a full-length mirror, and that was the first time that I had seen myself since my injuries. Now, a few weeks before, this is probably, I guess, 4.5 weeks now. I did 6 weeks in hospital, so this is probably 4.5 weeks post-injury. So 5 weeks before that, I was 6'2", and I weighed about 16 stone. I was very heavily into, lifting weights and that kind of stuff and staying physically fit. And as I rode past this mirror, I was now, like you see, Christ, what? It's not a very good example, but I'm probably about 3.5 feet tall without prosthetics. And back then, obviously, because I'd lost both my legs and my right arm, I'd lost a lot of weight, but I was also fighting off infection. My eyes were very much drawn into my head. I was very gaunt and, poorly looking. And I think at that time I weighed less than 9 stone. So I'd gone from 16 stone to less than 9. I'd gone from 6'2" to 3.5 foot. You know, I used to like to think that I was a bit of a pretty boy, and used to have a tan and wear tight fitting clothes and swagger around, and I'd gone from that to this, and I knew that it was permanent. There was no way this was going to change, and so I don't mind admitting that I've said this to thousands of people that I've spoken in front of. I actually broke down and cried at that point when I saw myself and I realised the severity of my situation. I just broke down and cried, pretty much for the entire duration of that evening, for that night. It just really hit me, hard that as positive as I was in the hospital bed, and as much as I was focusing on what I could be doing, this was my reality, and I was gonna have to suck it up and deal with it. Now, again, before I actually talk about getting over that, something again that I am perfectly happy with admitting, and something I am certainly not ashamed of, is that in that period between being told I'd never walk again and actually seeing myself in the mirror, I did contemplate suicide. Now, I'm a very relaxed person. I don't say this to try and come across as macho, but a lot of stuff doesn't bother me. I take a lot of things in my stride. I laugh it off, think of ways around it, do what it takes to get over it, and that's just how I am. Which is probably what got me through training to be a Royal Marine in the first place. But this all, came hitting me at once. It seemed like too much. I just didn't think I'd be able to handle it, and so I did. I did contemplate suicide, and I actually remember even thinking to myself, when I'm feeling at my lowest, I can't even cut my own wrist because I don't have a hand to be able to do it, which I chuckled about a little bit. But in all seriousness, it was a tough time. But I had incredible support around me. I had all these people around me just willing me to go on and get better. I didn't really want for anything. I didn't need anything. Everything was supplied for me. I had, great care when I was in the hospital. And, like any downtime that we all have, from time to time in all of our lives, eventually it passed. I got on with it and again started refocusing on the future. Now, this is probably something for another time, something I'd like to talk about during another episode. But one thing that really gave me a focus was finding a mentor. There was no one in the UK. I was the UK's first triple amputee, I believe since the Second World War, certainly the first one from Afghanistan. So there was nobody who had success and overcame these injuries in the UK. I'm not going to go into it now, but I found a guy, a great friend of mine from California called Cameron Clapp, who I used as a mentor, first of all via the internet, by watching his videos and reading his blogs, and really using it as inspiration to see what was achievable and what was possible despite these injuries. And that really helped me focus. I've always been of this attitude that if there is somebody in the world that can achieve something, then the rest of us really don't have any excuse why we can't do the same. If we're in a similar situation, he was a triple amputee, I was, all it would do for me to emulate a similar level of success to what Cameron had would be to have him mentor me physically, also mentally, pick his brains about his thought process and how he attacks this, how he attacks that, how he looks at things, how he approaches things. and just do my best to copy it as close to he had. I mean, he cracked the formula. You know, it's the same if you want to be a millionaire or a successful business owner or a, I don't know, Olympic gold medalist cyclist. You know, if someone else on the planet has achieved that and they're in a similar situation to you, all you really have to do is copy their physical and mental plan and approach to it, and you can achieve similar results. And so I knew that. I've kind of always known that throughout my entire life, and that was my focus then. You know, copy what this guy does, model him, you know, learn from him, and then overcome this. You know, and reclaim my life. You know, make people proud, represent the Royal Marines to the highest standard that I could. You know, and really take back charge and take some responsibility, you know, for my own life. I was the only one who was ever gonna make this work, you know, and that was my attitude from the beginning. So that's how I overcame it. I had great support around me. I found a mentor and a role model, and then I developed the plan and I took action. So I'm trying to keep these as short as I can, guys. Thank you for the question. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Please keep sending the questions in. mark@markormrod.com. I do endeavour to answer every email that I get. You know, I can't answer all the Facebook and Instagram stuff, but I'm always hitting the like button to let you know that I've read it and you know that I acknowledge it, and I thank you for the support. But keep the questions coming in. I'm going to try and make this a regular thing. I really enjoy it. Keep an eye out for me now on Facebook Live, Periscope. I'm going to try and multi-purpose these things at the same time. So the next one hopefully will be going, you know, on one camera to YouTube, one camera to Facebook, and the other camera to Periscope. So thank you guys. Appreciate it. Hope it helped. Hope it was informative. If you have any burning questions, mark@markormrod.com. And if you don't already, check me out. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I'm all over the place. Thank you.